Hi, this is Roberta Glass, and today we're talking to Susan Fensten. You have a very soft voice, Susan. She's going to talk to us about cyberstalking and her experiences. Stay tuned. So welcome, Susan. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself and why you wanted to write this book?
Hi, thanks for having me on.
Sure.
I went to art school to learn for painting and drawing, but I ended up working in publishing. I had an accidental temp job. It wasn't an accidental job. It was like a wonderful, fortuitous temp job working in publishing and being as a book publicist. So I just kind of immersed myself in the book world for the last 30 so or more years. And I never intended to be a writer. I never ever thought I would write a full-length book. I had written one short story about a haunted apartment that I lived in Williamsburg, and it did get published, but that was, something really short. I never expected to ever write a whole book, but I thought this story really just needed to be told because I had told it so many times. I told it to police. I told it to FBI agents. Told it to judges, told it to my friends, my family, and so many times in telling this book, and for over the time period that these events took place, I just felt like it was something that really needed to be preserved and just retraced and put back together. So I thought, as a creative challenge, to try to do that.
Well, you did it really well. I mean, there's so many rich characters, but it starts with your family, and that was really interesting. Can you talk a little bit about growing up in New York and who your family were?
Well, my mother's originally from New England, and she went to the Boston school, the museum school in Boston, and she immediately after that wanted to come to New York City. So she convinced her father to let her go to Parsons. So in 1959, she went to New York City, where she met my father, John, whose family's originally from New York City, but he was born upstate. And she was taking fashion illustration classes at Parsons, and he was studying with Strasberg at the Strasberg School, the New York Actors Studio. And Susan Strasberg became pretty friendly with my parents, and actually visited me at the hospital when I was born, and that's where I got my name from, was from Susan Strasberg. Oh. So they were just like these super talented, really motivated people, in love, young, and then had kids, married, had kids, and then my father just sort of like kind of fell apart emotionally, psychologically, and would often disappear. So we were struggling a lot most of the time. My mother was raising my sister and I alone. It was no help coming from anywhere, and just struggling along and living on the Lower East Side, which is now called the East Village, but back then it was the Lower East Side, and paying dirt cheap rent, getting robbed, struggling. When she's making $35 a week as a waitress, working at the World's Fair out in Queens, and like paying $40 a month, and we were really just struggling. So we grew up in Manhattan, which was great in the 60s and the 70s, and everything they say about the time and the place back then is true and more. It was dirty and wild and dangerous, and it was great. It was really great. So we moved uptown to Spanish Harlem in 67, and we lived there till I was about 12, and then we moved out to Queens, and then a long series of events where the family just really started to separate out a bit as time moved on. But I had a very colorful, very creative upbringing. My mother's an artist, so she was always the light of my life, and extremely talented and very positive and beautiful. And she got a job working in animation and worked on many, many animated advertising campaigns like Cheerios and all of the Hawaiian Punch commercials, and then then moved on to other things throughout her career, like Beavis and Butthead and Schoolhouse Rock. And she was a really major person in those times, inking and painting, back before the Xerox machine was invented. So between the two of them, I had a lot of inspiration.
And you talk about the death of your sister by suicide, and the story starts with a look for your family. Do you think you would have wanted to look for your family if your sister hadn't died?
I've thought about that before. Perhaps, yeah, I was always curious. When you come from a broken family, there's half your history is missing and half of you. You want to take those two pieces and put them together. You want to know. People just want to know what made me. It's natural curiosity. We're all blended. We all come from different places, and we all love our family stories, and we hear them from our relatives over and over, and it's good stuff. But my father wasn't talkative and very reclusive and not interested in any of that or really much at all, and so I never got anything with regard to the Fensten half of the family. So in the early 2000s, when I was dipping my toes into the internet, there was a very early genealogy site. There may have been two, but there was one specific, and I thought, well, this is a good outlet for me to just sort of, get a little bit of maybe a flashback into history somewhere. So I posted a message on genealogy.com asking about my father's father, Morris Feinstein.
Continue. Thanks.
So I'd left this message about asking just a, general question, does anybody have any memory of Morris Feinstein from New York City, turn of the century? And I really didn't expect any answers at all. It was, I was on the Feinstein page, and it was very busy, but, I thought, well, this is like a needle in a haystack. I'm sure nothing will happen.
But you did get an answer. Who answered?
By my great surprise, it was in about a week, I got an answer from a woman named Karen Gardner, and she said that she was also popping around on genealogy, looking up her family's pages, and then out of curiosity looked up the Feinstein page, saw my post, and she said she nearly fell out of her chair. We had this, it kind of looked like we had the same grandfather, which was plausible because my grandfather had two marriages and two sets of children. So the idea that there were second or third cousins out there was absolutely possible. So we started sort of exchanging emails. We got off the board. We got each other's email addresses, and we started corresponding to each other, sending photos, and just gradually getting acquainted like that.
And you also heard from other members of the family, correct? Like
yeah, not
Karen?
right away.
Okay.
She was kind of like hiding. I wouldn't say hiding, but I got the sense that she didn't want to tell her brother and sister about me just yet. She alluded to some kind of problem that she had gotten into meeting a friend online as part of some recipe club. So I thought, my image of Karen was like, she was like this, sweet housewife living in upper middle class Massachusetts, and maybe, fishing for family on the internet may not go down so well with her, maybe conservative type, buttoned up family. But eventually she said that she did tell Leonard about me, and then her sister Sharon too.
It was also that she said, oh, I have a brother, sort of hinted that he might be a little eccentric and offbeat, or, a little bit, living an unconventional life, which was something you were familiar with from your family. So
yeah,
it was kind of rang true. So how did other members of the family start appearing into this saga?
Well, she introduced me by email to Leonard, who lived in New Jersey and was described as a little mysterious.
Right.
And he was a wealthy Wall Street whiz who kind of lived in semi-retirement, did really well, and lived in New Jersey, but was just kind of mysterious. And she's also said he was a little emotional. So if you meet him, and he might cry. And I thought, well, a couple of emails into it, maybe if he seems normal, it would be fun to meet downtown in Manhattan somewhere for coffee. I mean, out in public, safe, normal, and, it's just one of those things. People do meet each other online, and I thought, well, if there's a connection and we can be friends, great. If not, no big deal. But it was kind of a little bit of an adventure.
And on one email you got a whole bunch. It was supposed to be an attached picture, but it was a correspondence, and they were between Sharon and Karen. Is that correct? Where they're
Yes.
talking about you, and they're accusing you of just being someone who looks for money, and then the other one saying, "No, give her a chance." I mean, it's just like a back and forth between the two, and it's like hearing something you shouldn't overhear, and really incredibly hurtful reading, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Extremely. I felt terrible.
And so you were accused of looking for money, not being right, maybe possibly sexually deviant. I don't know. Maybe that comes in later. I mean, it was just so. How did you respond to that?
Really hurt me. I really took it like a gut punch. Like, what part of my chit chat with her sister Karen would have tipped her off to me being some kind of a predator or con artist, as she kind of, described. I was really hurt, and I wrote back to both of them. First, I wrote back to Karen. I said I was really hurt and I was really upset, and there was just no need for this, and that I had never shown anything other than just a normal interest in just family stuff. And so then I wrote to Sharon and basically told her she was paranoid and that you're wrong, and I don't want to hear from. I mean, along those lines, enough of you.
Oh, and how did people in your life react to this? You had one really good friend who you confided everything, and did they encourage you to sort of distance yourself, or what was that like?
Well, I started sharing my my meeting with this family with a couple of friends, one friend of mine at work, and another friend of mine that I knew from Williamsburg, Brooklyn, who now lived in D.C. He was somebody I'd sort of lost touch with, and then we had reconnected. So I was sharing this with him and saying, and then everything was like all normal and everything. It went from like me and Karen talking about, oh, what are you having for holidays? What are you cooking? Maybe we should have a visit, stuff like that, to like me being accused of like crimes and stuff. So I shared a lot of that with my friends, and they were really shocked. First they were happy for me, and then they were looking at me like, my friend at work was like, I don't know, these people sound really crazy. And it hurt me. I was really disappointed.
Right, because you had already had so many family disappointments up to that. It was just like another, in your real family.
I had really gotten used to losing people. I mean, my father had died, his brother died, my sister was gone. I really don't have that much family, so I was really used to losing people. So gaining a couple of people, even in a distant way, was really kind of thrilling in a way. And so this was real, like throwing a whole, wet blanket over the whole thing. I really felt hurt. Like, God, just the cutting things that she said about me. Like, I sent her a picture I sent Karen a picture of me and my dog on the waterfront in Williamsburg, and it looked very normal and nice to me, but then I was thinking, like, how does this look to, like, some upper middle class people from New England? I mean, maybe they look at like a broken down waterfront and, like a slum. Like, it really cut. It hurt.
It hurt. I know. I lived in that same area. When I moved in, my mom said, "There's no trees here. It's really ugly. There's no trees." And I thought, oh, it hurt, right? Yeah, I know how you felt, and it was also, it's a great technique to put you on the defensive too. That I was just talking about, that con artists do, accuse you of something that you didn't do or misunderstand you and accuse you of having some terrible trait that you don't have, because it instantly makes you, I don't know, kind of like submissive, kind of like step back and ingratiating towards them and want to please them. It's just a really sinister way to control someone.
Right, especially because I'd never indicated that there was anything odd about me. And, it also, it just kind of seemed like a way to sort of like get me feeling like really bad, sort of undermining my own self-esteem a little bit. Here I am, like having to defend myself.
So
it's like when you walk into a store and the security guard starts watching you. You're not going to steal anything, but he's like watching you. It makes you feel weird.
Right. Why me? What about me?
Yeah.
What about me gave that impression of, right. And so soon Leonard, the rich, eccentric cousin, gets in communication and very inappropriate. Can you describe what happened with him?
Yeah. Well, first, he gave me his AOL Instant Messenger handle. Remember that back from way back
Yeah.
then? AOL Instant Messenger, like the primordial beginnings of social media. And I was on Instant Mess, AOL, AIM. And so, though we weren't emailing, I had added him to my buddy list, and I could see him popping on and off. I'd be chatting with one of my friends, Bobby, specifically, just chit-chatting, goofing around on the internet, and then we would watch Leonard kind of pop on and off. He had stopped writing at a certain point, and a little while in, Karen was like, "Oh, well, I thought you and Leonard had already become friendly and everything." And I was like, "No, he just stopped writing to me." So I figured he just didn't want to know me. That also made me feel really bad too. And she said something odd. She says, "Well, I guess Sharon must have already gotten to him."
Those two was really an interesting dynamic. Like, it wasn't exactly good sister, bad sister, but it was like a little bit nicer sister to really kind of horrible sister. It was interesting that they
I
kind of
could
played
already
off each
tell
other.
that this trio had a lot of issues, power, struggle. Personalities are already starting to come through. Really, Sharon was just this angry, suspicious, oppressive person, manipulator. Leonard seemed to be manipulatable and mysterious. I mean, really, I really didn't know anything about him. And, Karen was there playing, doing the housewife thing. So, yeah, there was a lot of, like, stuff coming through between the three of them.
So, and also you started to get information about Leonard's possible criminal life. And
yeah.
So true crime cases also sneak into this story. And many different ones. And he's somehow, how is Leonard involved in these true crime cases?
Well, there's a lot of steps to get there in my experience with them. At one point, I started getting a lot of porn in my inbox.
Okay.
Someone was signing me up for all kinds of super, triple, double, quadruple X ultra porn, weird, wild, crazy porn. Like I was signing up for newsletters, signing up for websites, and I was getting like tons of this stuff, and it would always coincide when Leonard was off and online. I'd be hanging out online, and I would see his little icon swoosh on to the AIM box, and then all this porn would come pouring in, and then, I'm online, I'm chatting with Bobby, and we're watching all this happen, and I'm telling him, like, this is what's happening. I mean, you can see him too, right? I mean, he comes on, all this stuff comes into my inbox instantaneously, simultaneously, and then he pops off. So I complained. I complained to AOL. I complained to Roadrunner. I complained to all the IP servers that were there. That's all I thought I could do was like make some complaint to some random, internet provider, customer service place, and maybe hope that I don't know, maybe they could block him, throw him off. I don't know. So a short time after that, he sent me an email directly, which he hadn't done in a long time, and said, "You'd like to complain?" He said, I bet I can make you moan too, with this little devil emojicon thing. on it. And that really made me sick. I mean, that was just, it's one thing to somebody is sort of think, okay, yeah, she's dirt, don't trust her. But now it's like I'm just a sexual object now. And I was, these people were my family. It was really sickening. So I had to tell Karen. I didn't want to. It really made me feel sick to have to tell her, hey, your brother is like super weird. So I finally told her that, look, I put two and two together, and this your brother is doing this to me. I want it to stop. And then a little time passed, and then she wrote me this really long letter apologizing. I wish I had told you, been more forthcoming about him from the beginning, but here's the story. And Leonard had a psychiatric history that went back far into his childhood, and within the family there was a death in among the children. There was a mysterious fire that started, and it sent their mother over the edge. And there was talk that maybe Leonard had started it. But it goes further into his college days, where Karen detailed that he was arrested with two other men in New Jersey for the kidnap and rape of a young woman, and that he had somehow beat the charges, and the other two went away to prison for this. And she was kind of, at the same time, kind of downplaying it, too, like, oh, he was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. Mm-hmm. Oh, he didn't do anything to her. He wasn't involved. I mean, I was already getting the feeling that Karen has a long history of covering up for her brother. Not covering, but glossing and, deflecting. And so I'm hearing this, and it was like stepping on the third rail. Like, oh, great. So, of course, my friend and I, Bobby, we hopped online, and we started Googling, and we found these two other offenders, and their registered profiles in New Jersey are there on the New Jersey Department of Corrections website, and it was really, really horrifying. And I felt like I had reached already right then the point of no return.
But they also gave you an idea that they were watching you, too. At some point, like...
Well, they do. Leonard goes through a lot. He gets sent back to a psychiatric facility right after this, and then he gets out and begins an obsession with me, and then I start to receive emails from these offender friends of his, as well as a lot of other people, too, who now know my name, they've seen my picture, they know where I live, and then it just escalates from there.
So how did this affect your work, and how did it affect your relationship? And, I mean, it just seems like it's all the time. It's that you live in a terror, like a prison.
Yeah, it was a prison. It was absolutely a prison. It was terrifying. It was all-consuming. I couldn't concentrate. My work was slipping. Actually, I was not working for a couple of months, and then I got a job in the spring of 2004, and it was absolutely affecting my work. I was missing days at work. I was a wreck. I was losing weight. I was shaking. I mean, it really to really get into the nervous system and the skeleton of this thing. The book tells all of the day-to-day stuff that I was going through. It's really hard to impart that in an interview, even with all the time you've graciously given me. But to really get the sense of like how this is wearing me down, it was absolutely affecting me.
It's a complex story, and it's really a page turner, though. So they also use the telephone too. It wasn't just emails, right? You would get your boyfriend would get hang-up calls. You would get like a call at work saying, you have you have a very soft voice, Susan, right? Which is the title of the book.
Yeah.
And eventually,
my boyfriend starts getting some very creepy whispers, hang-ups, and messages. And I don't know how they got his phone number. That was impossible to figure out. How did they get his phone number? Yeah.
And also at work, everybody got a mass kind of porn email from you. So you were sort of outed as at work with someone who had this problem, right?
Well, it does end up at that point. I'm at work. There had been a long silence because a little bit before this, I had gone to the FBI. I'd gone to the cops many times. So after multiple trips to the police, trips to the FBI, there's a little bit of a downtime with this, and I start to get test bounces at my office email, where you just do like my first and last name. They do it with like work email, like sfensten at blah blah blah.com or Susan.Fensten. If you do enough of those combinations of things, you can get through ultimately, because that's how most business email addresses are constructed, right?
Right.
So I get something that obviously looks like a test to find out where I work, and I had never told any of them where I worked. Any of them. So the fact that they knew where I worked, they knew my boyfriend's telephone number, and it was sending him threatening calls. I was getting hang-ups. At one point, it's like late October, we're heading towards Halloween, there's something really terrible looming on the horizon, and I'm at my desk, and I'd gotten a lot of hang-up calls at work, too, like calls like I pick up the phone and a woman would scream at me, like, I want to smash your face in, and then hang up. And then this one time I picked up the phone, and then someone hung up right away. And as soon as I put the handset down, instantly into my inbox came an email, and the title of the email was, "You have a very soft voice, Susan." And then the message inside was from one of those offenders in New Jersey, and he said, "How would you like it if I came up behind you while you're walking your doggy tonight and wrapped my arms around you, little lady?" Like something like that. And that was one of the worst moments, right? It's live, it's real, it's happening. It's like, it's one thing to get a lot of emails, but it's another thing to like have the phone ring and then the email comes right there. Like you can feel that person right on the other side. You don't even know what's going to happen next. Like they've got you.
So what do you tell your boss when a big chain porn email goes around with your name on it? Do you tell them the whole story, or do you tell them part of it?
She knew that I was having problems because I was missing work. I was distracted. I'm sure I wasn't looking too good. I wasn't smiling. I wasn't eating. I wasn't listening to music. I was just being worked down, like systematically, it seemed. She knew I was having problems. So one day at work, I was sitting there, and one of my authors had just popped in unexpectedly and wanted to talk about publicity. And I've got my one eye on him, and I looked at my screen, and then suddenly, like, rolling down my screen was, your Yahoo greeting has been sent. Your greeting has been sent. Your greeting has been opened. Your greeting has been opened. So I'm getting all these notifications that I'd sent, like, dozens of emails throughout the company through this Yahoo greeting system, and then I was getting the notices as they were opening them, too, as these things did. And when I looked at it, it was like an animated thing. When you open it, it's like a greeting. Yahoo Greetings used to be this free e-greeting card thing where you could enter any email address at all, and it'll say that it was sent from that email, and there's no security confirmation stop, right? To confirm that it's you. So someone was sending from me to all of these people at work: the president of the company, my boss, production people, accounting, the IT guy, everybody, the art department, and I'm seeing the notices live time that they're opening it, and the message was, "I'm bored. I just want to have sex. If anybody's interested, buzz me later."
Disgusting. Yeah.
Yeah. So my boss sent around immediately a notice to all at the company. Just please disregard. Susan's having some problems. Just disregard. So yeah, that's the only damage control you can do. Meantime, I'm at work, and everyone in the company, it must be like, what the hell, this is sick. And I felt so sick. I felt like its sickness was just transporting itself through me to everybody now, and I'm like being thrown around like a doll at work. There's nothing I can do about it. And then these greetings just keep coming and coming and coming to the point where I had to get the IT guy to set up blocks on the server coming from multiple different domains. And this went on for a couple of days.
So, the FBI is actually quite, to your surprise, quite interested in the case. What did you think were you hopeful that they were going to solve it, or did you think that they would just sort of yes you and let it sit and not look into it?
I was really happy that they were looking at it, and it made me feel a lot better. Just in case something ever happened to me, at least someone would know where to start, because it was truly insane. It was truly insane, and it was so crazy, all of it, that even talking to you feel like you are crazy just trying to explain this to like any law enforcement official, FBI, cops. I wasn't never feeling guaranteed that anything would be solved, because the whole thing seemed very slippery and unknowable and mysterious and aggressive. I mean, it started and then it stopped. It went through a period where after I went to the FBI the first time, it just completely stopped. Right? It was like a switch had been flipped, and then all the stage goes dark, and all of these voices that were carrying on and on and on for months now went completely mute. And though I was really happy that it stopped, it was also really weird that it all just stopped like that.
Did you if you could do it again, if you had this happen to you again, do you think that would you get help sooner, or do you think is there a way to kind of prevent something like this? Is there a way that you can protect yourself against kind of like an attack like this, an onslaught?
There's no way to control people, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can control technology, and the law can control up to a certain point, but you really can't control people. Mm-hmm. I don't really have an answer for anyone who would like to know. I think that all cases are very different. I wouldn't be surprised if there were cases similar to mine out there, maybe not as twisted and elaborate, but I never underestimate anything. Like I was talking about stalking to someone that I met at the book expo at the Javits Center, and she was telling me that her niece went through some very strange stalking situation where she met a woman on Facebook who actually turned out to be a man and was obsessed with her, and then started calling her and calling her and calling her, and she kept changing her number, and he would keep calling her. And then finally, when it was finally all sorted out and the police got to the bottom of it, it turned out he worked for the telephone company, so that no matter what she did, he would always know her number. So I don't underestimate what people are capable of. I don't really have an answer what to do about people, but call somebody, tell somebody, do tell the police. I think things have changed now since my case, which was in the early 2000s. But it was right about that time that internet crime really started to take a foothold, right? Although it was not really known or really written about or talked about. But there was an article recently about how emojis and emoticons and all other kinds of internet language has started appearing in court documents, right around 2003, 2004. So it's interesting that my case happened then too, right? Just as soon as the internet becomes popular, it starts to be a crime scene.
And when it came time to press charges, there were no threats of violence, so that limited what they could charge this person with. Were you disappointed by that? Were you disappointed by...
There were threats of violence.
Okay.
There were telephone calls threatening to kill us, my boyfriend and I, rape me, kill us, kidnap us. So that is a crime, but I'm not a law expert, but I don't know that that's the angle that the FBI was pursuing when it finally gets the subpoenas out. That situation that I described to you that happened in my office where all those Yahoo greetings were sent to everyone in my company for days, that was the tripwire where the FBI was able to actually get a subpoena from a judge and find out this one particular email address who owned it, and that's what they did.
And your boyfriend had actually correctly guessed who this person was on more than one occasion. Why do you think that was?
I don't know. He's smarter than me.
Do you think it was a gut
I was
instinct,
too immersed in it to get, no. I was, the forest and the jungle was so dense, it was not a consideration of mine. I thought I had considered all possibilities, but apparently not. So there's no way to really describe, like, how fluid belief is when you're being manipulated. You're being stripped down of all the things that make you feel secure. Your sense of privacy, your sense of security, constant threats, reward, sudden rewards without any reason, and then more threats, and then more disorientation. Right. I was not thinking straight. Right. I thought I was. I thought I was being the, detective, taking care of business. And I was terrified, but I know I was just, I couldn't have guessed. I really couldn't have.
So maybe a little bit more distance from the situation. So the courtroom scene that you go as a witness, you're not going to give to the sentencing of this person. You're not going to give a witness impact statement. Why not?
I was afraid. For all my New York City wiles, I was a little bit afraid. I was overwhelmed. I've never been in a courtroom before, never experienced any kind of thing like that. And the perpetrator was still very intimidating to me. And I just submitted my written statement to the judge, which was fine. But I really had no intentions of speaking in court. I didn't have any idea that I wanted to stand there and have, the victorious last word. I was just in awe and, kind of shaking through it. But there was a point where I had to say something.
Right. It's interesting because this person shows no remorse. He blames you for it. There's an interesting back and forth with the judge, and he also gives you the finger, which is like doubly victimizing you. And it's like right to the very end, right? Even as he's being punished and is supposed to be, remorseful, is showing contempt for you. What do you think? What do you think? Why so much contempt and why so much anger? Do you think he had? And why did he pick you out?
It's been a long time, but I haven't really completely figured that out. I think it really speaks to a sociopathic psychology that has no remorse, has no real empathy, was able to essentially commandeer my life and play me like a fiddle, day in and day out for like a year and a half. Not sorry and angry about it. Not sorry. I mean, if you're in front of a judge who's going to sentence, a federal judge, no less, even if you hate my guts and you think you're right, you stand there and say, I am so sorry, I am wrong, I was wrong, I am sorry, and that's it, out of just self-preservation. But I think there's a certain type of aberrant kind of psychology that doesn't care about any of that. What's most important is making that point, right? I'm in control, I operate by my own rules, I've done nothing wrong here. And the anger, you could really feel it. Yeah, just flouting, in court. I don't know. I would imagine that somebody would at least pretend to be sorry, just for, stay out of trouble.
Right. And even if it's unconvincing, at least make a show of it. But It reminded me of Damien Echols, who's famous for giving the middle finger while he's, facing the death penalty. So,
Yeah, that's a very interesting, contrast. Compare and contrast. Maybe not so much contrast, but when you think about it, I mean, even in the West Memphis Three, there were 3 dead children. Right?
yes.
3 dead children. I can't believe any human being. Okay, I think he did it, but a lot of people think he didn't do it. But show some respect, right? We as normal people, more functioning, even with our own flaws, have something that makes us human, and that is empathy. And there are a lot of people in this world who just don't have it. They just don't have it. Something went wrong, or they just don't, they weren't born with it. I don't know.
Yeah, I think
there's
that's
a lot of them.
A lot of the reason, my opinion, I think a lot of the reason why you were targeted is because of your empathy and non-judgmental nature and your good qualities that this person didn't have. And they felt like they were going to just torment you.
Or become me, in a way. Become me, overtake me, operate me, right?
Yeah.
It's a very weird thing. I wish I had the education in the psychological field to really, appraise it fully. But there was maybe a jealousy or just a loathing and a love at the same time. I mean, without giving away the whole thing, it was a very complicated set of circumstances.
And has this person done well? Has kept on the right side of the law since this has happened?
I have no idea.
Huh.
No idea. No way to know. Have been keeping my distance, and hopefully at that end too. But the book is out now, so that's a whole different thing. It definitely still scares me. Absolutely. I mean, when you've tattooed and impressed upon somebody so many images, I mean, everyone from Leonard, and we didn't even really get into Leonard in this talk. This could be like a 3-part call.
Absolutely.
Leonard, I will carry with me for the rest of my life as a personality.
Sure.
So yeah, it's a real portrait of the victim, the predator, and how easy it was. And it just, like right now, I think about it, and I really, I'm not numb to it. I mean, it still affects me.
Well, I can imagine it's a crime of control through terror. And it's happening to women. Way more than 4 out of 5 victims are women. So
yes, that is absolutely true. And it's also true that internet stalking has now eclipsed physical stalking. There are more cases now of internet stalking than there are of physical stalking, which is terrible and horrible too. Absolutely, Jesus. I mean, I've been through that too. Physical stalking, people following you and showing up on you. But the internet thing is this. It's very shadowy and very slippery. I mean, there are cases where people are being harassed online by someone who lives in a different country, so you don't even have recourse against them.
Yeah, that's
right.
terrible.
I mean, that has happened. I've read about things that go on for years and years with psychos who live in another country, stalking usually a woman here in America, and there is absolutely nothing that you can do about it.
It's awful, awful. Thank you so much. This is a fantastic book. You can get it at Amazon. Where else? Bookstores?
Well, hopefully it'll be on bookshelves, but it's always on Amazon. There's a Kindle. There's a paperback. There's an audiobook in production right now that's going to be available soon, and it's turning out really, really well. The reader is fantastic, and I think people are going to like that. I want to listen to it. I want to listen to the whole thing read to me for the first time. That'll be really quite something. But I really, really appreciate you inviting me on your show.
Thank you.
To talk about this.